Good morning, learners. I bought a brand new fancy camera, and it looks like this. Fancy, hey? There's one big problem. I have no idea how to use it. So I guess that's what we're learning today. If you enjoy learning or enjoy learning with others, consider subscribing to this channel. I've got my fancy camera, I've got my tripod. Am I ready to start making YouTube videos? Some would say yes, others would say no. Now, one thing most professionals would agree on is if you have a brand new camera, the best way to get the most out of it is to do all the settings yourself in manual mode. At the moment, I've got it in auto mode, so it's sort of just doing everything by itself. But people say that's not how you get the most out of your camera. And now I'm asking, how do I get the most out of my camera? Well, there are three main things all beginner camera owners should learn about. That is shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Let's learn about all three of those things today. In these videos, I'm going to try and split them up into three different phases: explore, professional, and share. In explore, I'm going to explore. I'm going to try and learn everything I can by myself. That's where I'm just fiddling around, doing my own thing until I can get no further without help. In professional phase, I'm going to try and seek out a professional. Now that may be a real person, or that may be a YouTube video or a website. From there, I can learn as much as I can from those guys and research and do my best to learn that way. Now, after the professional phase where I've done my learning and practicing, I'm going to have a share phase. And that's hopefully going to be my final product to share with you. So let's start with the explore phase. All right, let's explore the shutter speed. Now, on this camera, it's 1/50. I have no idea what that means. Let's see what happens when we turn it all the way down to the lowest form. Let's go. Whoa, it's getting a lot brighter. And looks very slow. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. A lot of blur. Okay, let's see what happens if we turn it all the way to max. Alright, let's go all the way, maybe halfway. So the top was 1/4000. Now this is 1/400. Interesting. Very dark. Let's go a little less. Okay, so it gets darker when I do more. Let's see if it's as... No, it's not. No motion blur at all. So it's really like sort of crisp, I guess. All right. So that's was shutter speed. Let's go on. Actually, did you see that? Ooh. Let's turn this up again. Whoa! You see that? The light's back there? It looks like it's a treasure chest from like Zelda. Let's go into aperture. f3.5. That's what it says here. Let's take a look if I put it all the way down to the lowest. Okay, well this is what it looks like. Now let's see what happens when I put it on the highest. Whoa, it's getting darker. f22. You see me? Oh, you can see something. Alright, well that's pretty dark. Okay, well that seems to be like the... Seems to get darker the higher it is and lighter the lower it is. I'm going to keep it low so you can see me. Don't really understand aperture, but let's see. And this is ISO. ISO, let's see what happens if we put it down to the minimum. Okay, it's got really dark in here. And let's see what happens if we put it really high. Whoa! It's pretty bright in here. But at the same time, it's the same lighting. I haven't changed anything except for the ISO. Okay, let's mix this up. So we saw that shutter speed and aperture got really dark when I put it up. So let's see if I put ISO all the way up, because it's super bright, and put these all the way up. Oh, okay, I see. Alright, that's max ISO and max aperture. I mean max frame rate. Whoa, look how it's like all funky looking. John Connor. Alright, let's turn it all the way down. All the way down. Very bright. Okay, let's see what happens when we keep the ISO up and put the aperture all the way up. Oh, you can still see me? Oh, yeah. So it looks like an old TV. The lighting here is a bit dull. Alright, let's turn it all the way back down. Interesting. Alright, so that was me just exploring those little 3 things by myself. Let's see what the professionals can tell me about these 3 things. Okay, I'm back. And I've learned a lot. I've watched these YouTube videos, I'll put them up here. And I've read these websites, I'll put them here or in the description. Okay, let's start off with shutter speed. I've got my notes here. Shutter speed, that is how long the light hits the sensor. When we talk about shutter speed, lower, as we saw before in the video, equals motion blur. Higher equals jittery movement. So it's like super crisp, almost too crisp for us, and they say it sort of makes an uncomfortable sort of scene. They say in horror movies when someone's about to be killed by an axe, it's good to have those jittery shutter speeds because it makes people feel uncomfortable. So that's something to learn. And then I also learned about the 180 degree rule. Now that incorporates the frames per second, and they say your shutter speed should be twice your frames per second. So I've got 24 frames per second. I'm gonna double that to make 48 frames per second. And let's see, I'm already on 150. So 1 to 50. So that's what they say is the most natural shutter speed for your frame rate. So shutter speed is how long light hits the sensor. Now aperture is how much light hits the sensor. They talk about the sensor and the lens as like growing and getting smaller. So a small aperture is actually the lens all the way open. All right? And a high aperture is the lens all the way shut. So it's interesting because low aperture, so low f-stops, which is the f3 point whatever, means there's more light being put into the camera, and the higher the f-stop, less light's going to be in. Now, I didn't really see much of a difference when I changed my aperture and f-stop, but what actually happens is the depth of field and the focus on the camera. So a low number, that means the lens is open. A low number is focusing on one thing like the subject in the middle, while also blurring everything out in the background. A high aperture or a high f-stop would mean you're having everything in focus and you can see every individual thing. So in YouTube at the moment, I think it's quite fashionable to have the aperture really low. Now that has a focus on the subject and blurs out the background. And I think that's fashionable because if you ever have anything and you hold it and look at it, your eyes naturally blur out everything behind it. So when you're looking at the subject of a video, it's quite unnatural to have everything else in focus as well. So what your eyes are doing, it feels natural to see the subject in focus and everything behind it blurred out. Unfortunately, I don't think my camera is good enough to make everything in the background blur out, but I've got it as low as possible at the moment. Onto ISO, or ISO. Now ISO actually seems like the simplest. It's literally the brightness of the film. Now if I have a low ISO, that means I'm not getting any light into the sensor. If I have a really high, it means I'm getting a lot of brightness. So if you look back at what I was exploring before, when it was around 200, it was super dark and you could barely see me. When it was on 12,600, it was so bright my face was like the sun. What they say about ISO is the lower it is, the better it is. When you pump up the ISO and try and make that sensor more sensitive to the light, it actually starts to artificially create light that's not there. And as a result of that, it gets really grainy. So the thing is, you need to have a bright room, bright lights, and your ISO needs to be down. Now, checking out my camera now, on manual, my shutter speed is at the right speed of 24 frames a second. That means I've doubled it to make 50 or 48 to 1/50. I've changed my aperture to all the way down to the bottom so that I can have me in the focus with everything blurred in the background. And now I'm just messing around with the ISO. The ISO at the moment is at 1000. Let's see if I can go any lower without it looking weird. All right, that's 800. That's one down. So this is hopefully the best manual output for my camera. If you have any more tips or comments you want to add, please tell me down the bottom, because I love learning and I want your feedback. Now, I've followed the recommendations of everyone online about how I should set my camera up. So hopefully it looks better than it did in automatic mode. All right, that's hopefully. All right, theoretically, it should look better. If it doesn't, I'm just gonna keep it on automatic mode. But I think I'm looking pretty fly at the moment. So hell yeah. I'll see you in the next one.